Yeah, what up guys, SloMoBackSlap here, slapping you with another video, and today we're going to do a quick little update on the first Descendant because Nexon has provided yet another dev note update for the first Descendant community. In this update, they talk about just some of their thought processes on some of the decisions that they made, but speak mostly about the changes that are currently ongoing due to feedback from the open crossplay beta. So before we get any further, please hit the like and subscribe button. Really appreciate that, especially if you would like to see more updated content on what's happening with the first Descendant. And let's get into it. Okay, so first up, they did briefly discuss the release date. They have not finalized it yet, but they are currently working on an actual release date, and they just ask us to bear with them a little bit longer on that. Moving on from there, they admitted they have roughly 200 employees currently working in various roles in preparation for the launch of the game, which is pretty good. They talked about a minor spoiler alert here that Descendants will work with the main character, other Descendants, other characters to complete objectives. And we saw some of that with Bunny working with one of the starter Descendants that we choose in the very beginning of the open beta. But we will see these Descendants work with our main character to complete objectives and make significant appearances as NPCs in the main story. And in addition to that, they're developing original storylines for all Descendants to give them more character and narrative depth, which is awesome because that's kind of something that we see from other games that are multiplayer centric but still provide some context and some story aspects that allow the gamer to really understand the characters that they are choosing to control. So they're not just avatars, they're actually full-fledged characters that people could resonate with. Along with the story improvements, they're also preparing richer in-game cinematics. And I always look forward to that more than seeing simply voice logs or voice chatter between characters while you're playing the game, although that is fine, but you could be far more engrossed in where a story is going by seeing actual in-game cutscenes. Okay, so next up is a hot topic that a lot of people had a lot of feedback with them about, and that was the very emptiness of the zones that we do the gameplay in, the fighting in. People felt that they were kind of empty, kind of dead, not a lot going on, and did not have a lot of personality to them. They did slightly push back on that, not necessarily saying they weren't going to change it, but to defend the choice to have it the way it was. Because of AI, they wanted those areas to be more organized in how enemy AI would be interacted with for the sake of online play and shooting. But regardless of that, they are making significant changes to the fields. In order to minimize the area where battle occurs, they have decided to divide the fields into smaller sections and incorporate a variety of non-mission content in between. These include out-of-combat content and enemies that defend their bases regardless of mission. Okay, so we may run into maybe a mini boss here and there that doesn't have any kind of tie to a particular mission, but it's something that you may run into in the open field, in the open world, and you can engage in. Now, also, while increasing the density of content in the fields with such changes, we're also working on increasing the density of players in a given space to facilitate co-op play. This is something that was one of my feedbacks to them because I felt that there was only no more than 3 to 4 players every time I would go into a zone. And if those 3 to 4 players have already completed some of the missions that I need to complete, they are very unlikely to join me in those quests. Furthermore, when you had those bigger missions that you needed to complete at the end of a zone, again, if someone else is working on those side missions and I'm already ready for that big mission, there's no one that is there to do that with me. And a lot of those missions were designed to be done with more than one person. In regards to that, they are making adjustments so that you'll be more likely to run into other players who are on the same mission. And in those dungeons that I mentioned, they now have matchmaking for co-op play so that you'll be able to have someone there potentially to do those missions with. And it will also be possible to request help if you are in the middle of that mission and you're near the end and you're finding that you may be a little bit underleveled for the particular content that you're playing and you would like some help there. These are all good changes in my opinion. Next up, they did speak on the modules, which essentially modules is how build diversity would be in the first Descendant. And they do believe that they think that how the modules are set up are good, and they liked what they saw from streamers and content creators on how they had set up their particular Descendants. But they said they did check the data, and the data revealed that modules utilization was somewhat skewed. It's possible that their short test period didn't leave enough time for experimentation and to use other different, less popular modules for particular builds. But given that their goal is to enable a large range of build diversity and build settings, they did not particularly care for the lack of diversity in builds. But in order to guarantee that every Descendant will have a unique module setup at launch, they are looking at doing a number of changes to support various different playstyles and different skill sets. And overall, I think that's good. I think that when it comes to looter shooters, like the better build diversity you have, the higher chances of longevity that game has. The idea of, let me try to play with this character in a very different way than I played with them before, is always something that can tide looter shooter fans over while they wait for the next expansion, while they wait for the next story beat, while they wait for the next different mode or content update that's coming through. And when you have very diverse builds that can be done, this absolutely ends up becoming a state where players, despite not having new content, will continue to keep engaging in your game until said content does show up. Next, they wanted to discuss the in-game content, and they talked about the intercept void battles, and they consider that to be one component of their in-game material. But they said for launch, the open areas will also have hard difficulty, which will yield better loot when you complete those missions on the harder tier difficulty. In order to get this higher difficulty, you do have to complete the main story in all 8 fields. In addition to matchmaking being supported for all dungeons, these dungeons will have hard difficulty as well, and you can choose penalties to kind of challenge yourself in a harder environment. And I do like that they address that, since this is a live service game with constant updates, that they need constantly updated in-game content as well. They address that just having intercept void battles be as a, I guess, initial launch in-game content is simply not enough to keep players going for a long period of time. So they will be providing new in-game material through updates when it's required. Now, for that, I'm not certain, what do you consider to be required? Are you going to have updates and new content ready to go when you look at the metrics and you see that player retention has fallen or concurrent players has fallen, and then you decide to launch new updates? Or is your goal to have a cadence of new content coming out in a consistent basis? I think some clarification there is warranted. And consoles. So the developers here admitted that this was their first time working on anything on these consoles. And so gamepad controls and optimization, they admitted, were not up to par, not up to a particular standard that they believe they should be at, and they intend on fixing those issues. They also announced that the ratio between console and PC players was 50-50, which is quite a high ratio they believe for an online game. They were somewhat surprised by that. And with that in mind, they want to make sure that the console players feel equal to the PC players in regards to the amount of care they're putting into optimizing the game and making sure the experience is a quality experience. So there will be improvements in a number of areas, including stabilization of performance, as well as other features. But that's about it with the update. Hopefully the very next time we hear from Nexon and the first Descendant development team, they will be talking about a release date as we're closing in on the summertime. Spring will be here soon, so hopefully we hear something from them soon. And I also kind of hope that we get another open beta before the game comes out, just to see how some of the changes feel, give additional feedback on those changes, as well as for them, hopefully allow them to kind of test load the capacity they may need to make sure that when they launch the game, that we don't have server issues in trying to get in, or there not being enough bandwidth and capacity for all the gamers that are trying to play the game. But that's about it. Appreciate you guys for making it this far into the video. Again, hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more content on the first Descendant in the future. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care.